Thank you so much for joining us today. I am joined with Anindya Kundu, who is serving as our featured keynote speaker at our upcoming Summit on Student Success event. I'm Tiffany Rudd, Convention and Event Director at IASB, and I'm just thrilled to have Anindya Kundu come for this event. He's going to be such a fantastic keynote speaker. So welcome, Anindya.
Thanks, Tiffany. I'm really excited to join you today and see you in a couple of weeks.
So I know your background is kind of as an educational sociologist, studying those social factors that influence the student experience. But you've also delved into another very specific component of that area of study, exploring achievement gaps and opportunity gaps, as those all can interplay with that student agency component that you mentioned. So could you speak to that a little bit and help us understand what some of those gaps are?
Sure, definitely happy to provide a little more context. So the first piece of context that's important is the definition of agency, which I will share at the event. But I define agency as a person's ability to leverage resources in order to overcome obstacles that they're facing. And so, we can see, anyone who's been around kids can see and sense agency when they're around it. When kids have an interest that they just gravitate towards, they figure out the workarounds to get as close to that thing as they can. But there are opportunity gaps, as you mentioned in your question. And so the first other piece of context I would provide is that there's a reason that we're using opportunity gap in lieu of achievement gap. So when we use the framing of achievement gap, we tend to think of student achievement as an individual pursuit that student A is achieving because they have grit, resilience, and just general stick-to-itiveness, and student B may not be doing so because they might be uninterested or lazy. When we flip the language to opportunity gap, we're actually then considering that achievement is more of a social outcome. We're taking the individual and kind of making it more of a community-centric model, and we're realizing that there's a lot of barriers that can be in the way of student B from achieving. Some of those might be, they may have 3 or 4 siblings at home that they have to help get ready before they can go to school. They may have family issues related to in school. They may not have as high technology as kids in better neighborhood schools may have. They may not have expert teachers like students in more resource communities may have. Then we can go to a more structural level where students might be living in a food desert, so the access to nutrition may not be as great as other students. That actually affects achievement in a variety of ways. Let's say a student is walking by a bodega on the way to school and has $1 to spend on soda or chips. That's going to get them jittery when they actually show up to class. And so that's an opportunity gap. That lack of access to something better. But the problem is we often only see the manifestation of a student's behavior, their jitteriness, their aloofness, and we equate that with like an uninterest in learning. And so when we can try to broaden our perspective and think about all of the stuff kids are bringing with them to school in their invisible backpacks, that's when we can actually try to create the conditions for students to learn and thrive and really tap into that agency that they already have.
So as we consider our membership as education leaders and being policymakers, how can we think about creating those environments that really foster student agency within their own school districts?
Definitely. So one of the first things I would say is that it's hard, it's actually impossible, obviously, to sometimes add more resources to a situation, especially in education. Resources are tight and slim. Educators and people supporting educators are often working with constrained resources. And so that's why I think thinking towards student agency is free and important to do. And fundamentally, what that means is looking at all students as being at potential instead of at deficit. So seeing the competencies, abilities that kids already bring to the table with them when they show up to class and trying to figure out a way to take students where they are and building upon that to help them, realize where they can go. I would say 2 main factors help students across the board, and I will go much deeper into this during my keynote and in the other session. One is social factors, and the other is cultural factors. And again, these are free to implement across schools and school systems. Related to social factors, I would say, students really need to see it to believe that they can do it. And so there's a way to bring in other peers or adults into school spaces who help students remind themselves that success is possible for them. If students can relate to mentors, perhaps they have some kind of qualities that they share with them, they're more able to position themselves in a different worldview. So whenever you can kind of open students' networks to something broader, that's a huge piece. And the other piece is culture. I would say that culture is dynamic and fluid, and we have to understand that all kids bring with them rich and lively culture. And it may not be exactly what we're thinking when we're thinking about what academic success might look like. But in many parts, that's because we have a narrow view of academic success culture. If we can broaden our view of what success looks like and how we can get to success, we're more able to see the strengths and gifts that students bring with them to school systems, and figure out how to support them. I'm going to tell one of these stories when I'm with you, but if we see a kid is scribbling away at a notebook all day long and writing rap lyrics and they're disinterested in school, maybe there's something there that we can use to connect that interest to literacy. And so that's a real world story that I will be telling more in depth in person. But really noticing this one kid's interest in rap lyrics set a different course for this child's life that allowed him to become incredibly successful in a different field, the field of finance. And so that's the story of Jay Stud. I'm excited to share that with you all when I see you in a couple weeks.
Wow, can't wait to hear it. So speaking along those cultural factors, our school board members, of course, are leaders in their communities, and they really do help set the tone for their school districts. So what is it that has you most excited to come speak with our school board members and as education leaders as they work to support students in their district?
I am incredibly excited to speak to school board members. Usually my audiences are in schools. They're educators, educational professionals, students at the higher ed level. But school board members have a particular incredibly important vantage point where they can kind of set the tone for schools in the district. They can create the visions and the broad plans that schools should try to adhere to in order to meet a variety of metrics. And so I'm going to make a huge case for how the school board members can try to think of agency as a core value. And what that means is that how can we create a system or support our schools in such a way where we're cognizant of the many non-academic needs that children have, yet affect their ability to do academic achievement. And so when we're able to kind of enact a vision that, it doesn't matter what students' lives are like outside the school, but when they come to school, we will treat them as a whole child. We're going to accept them for all of their strengths and flaws and build upon that. When you have an entity like a school board leading with that kind of vision, it's incredibly contagious. It trickles down to all levels of the school system. And again, I think real change always starts and depends on leadership. And so the school board has an incredible opportunity to set the tone for, the school year, and really state what should matter to the people who are working in the schools. Because I think ultimately we all care about the same thing. We want students to succeed. And so hopefully I'm going to be able to provide a couple of new insights around the same question that we're always dealing with, to think about how we can help more diverse student bodies thrive as well.
Wow, I am so excited to hear from you in a couple of weeks. These are all really wonderful insights and components tying into your research in educational leadership and educational sociology. And it really, like you said, all boils down to our shared passion of wanting to help students succeed. And that
Definitely.
is a fantastic reason why we can't wait to have you as our keynote speaker for our Summit on Student Success event, April 27th and 28th in Ankeny, Iowa at the FFA Enrichment Center. Thank you
Awesome.
again, Anindya, for joining the call today. We're so
Thank you so
excited to have
much.
you come, and we can't wait to see you in a few weeks.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited to get out there and be a part of the community. So see you very soon, and we'll keep the conversation going.